is Oduor. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the National Drought Management Authority, which is in the Ministry of Devolution and Planning. Thank you very much. First of all, Turkana is categorized as an arid county, which means naturally is prone to drought, faces drought risk, and it is like 85 to 100, it has 85 to 100% aridity. And when you consider factors that make a place be characterized like that, then one of them is rainfall. It means it's a place with low rainfall amounts. It is a place with high temperatures. It is a place with the environment that is degraded. And really that's a natural phenomenon. It happens that way. There's nothing really you can do about it. There are so many other areas in the Gad region. There are so many other areas in the world that are even worse in terms of aridity. Some are even just like Turkana. So that is how Turkana is naturally. That's how it's been. As far as I can remember, even in 1970s, 1960s, 1980s, that's how it's been. Of course, now the situation is worsening with the climate change issues, with the population growth. Now you have very many people who suffer when we have drought, with the continuous degradation of environment. The problem is becoming worse. So the issue is with Turkana being like that naturally, and that's a natural phenomenon that happens in an arid area or arid county. What do we do so that the population in those areas can cope with drought? We can reduce their vulnerability, because what happens in a place like Turkana is that the communities are vulnerable, which means they don't have the capacity to cope with the drought. How can we reduce that vulnerability? How can we reduce the risk? How can we increase the resilience so that even if drought is there, because droughts will always be there in a place like Turkana, then the impact are minimized. Then the communities don't suffer the way they suffer. Then they can survive. And also at the same time taking care of climate change and adaptation, taking care of what is happening now and what is likely to happen in the future. That is now the issue. And that's what we should be tackling as a government and as all the other stakeholders dealing with the drought, food security, and other issues. Yeah. Actually, drought problem in Kenya is in most of these arid and semi-arid counties. We call them ASALs. Right now as NDMA, since we were established in 2013, we're only dealing with the 23 priority counties, the ones that are prone to drought, the ones with the highest risk. But we are a national institution, will expand gradually and cover the other counties. So the drought is a problem in all the ASALs, arid and semi-arid counties, but the problem is bigger in arid counties. And not only Turkana, we now have 9 arid counties. And when there's a problem, maybe Turkana is the one we hear too much in the news, but even the other areas suffer most. And it's just what I've said is because of poverty, is because of that vulnerability. So there are 2 issues here to be tackled. One is that what happens when we have a drought. When we have a drought, first of all, we have to know that the drought is coming. And this is where we have early warning information coming in, so that through the early warning information, the data that we collect, the data that we analyze, we can know it's coming. Also from the other early warning information like the weather forecast from the Kenya Met and other issues, so we know it is coming. Once we know it's coming, even before we know it's coming, we plan for it. We say when drought strikes, what do we do? And this is what we hear about response. When there's drought, then we have to respond. And response in the various sectors. We have to respond on livestock sector so that we prevent the livestock from dying. That means we have to supply the feed, we have to supply the water. We have to do something about disease control. Because when you have drought and the livestock meet in certain areas where there's pasture and water, then because of that convergence, you get a lot of diseases. We have also to take care of other sectors like water itself. Maybe you need water tracking, you need clean water, something like that. And then the issue of food. Then we have to give the communities affected food. And also even the other issues like health and nutrition, which is also food and other things like diseases and the environment and all this. So we have to intervene. And we plan to intervene as long as drought persists. For example, this time, we started intervening last year. Actually, by June last year, the situation was very bad. County governments were intervening. By July, the national government started intervening to support what the county governments were doing. And even up to now, it is continuing until such a time when maybe it rains and the situation changes. So that's what we call response. Response means drought is there, and there are certain activities that you take to minimize the impacts, to cushion the affected communities. Those are response short-term activities. The other side of the story is that what we see now as a drought impacts is a symptom of something. It's not the problem. This is what we see now. It's like you are putting, I keep on giving example, you are putting off the fire, but the cause of the fire is there. So the cause of this fire, because the drought exacerbates the bad situation, drought just shows something is wrong somewhere, it's not happening. But the really cause of this is what I'm saying, the vulnerability. The community don't have the capacity to deal with it. They are vulnerable, they are at risk, they are not resilient. And this is an issue of long-term sustainable development in those areas. Droughts can come, but if we have the water infrastructure is properly developed, if, for example, livestock infrastructure is properly developed, if we have maybe irrigation, if you have so many roads, for example, if you have the issue of conflict building, peace and conflict building, or the issue of infrastructure, water, health, agriculture, if you have the issue of sustainable livelihoods, we have livestock issues working very well, we have crops issues, we have other livelihoods like people doing businesses, trade, diversified livelihood, people survive on other things. If you have, for example, the issue we call human capital, education, health and nutrition issues properly done, if you have all those other issues working very well, then droughts can be there, but people will not be vulnerable, the impact will be minimized. So that is the issue. Drought will always be there, it's an arid county, but how do you ensure that people there survive with it? Just like it's done in other areas. It's a long-term sustainable development, it takes time, it's a very expensive thing, and I'm happy to say now that the government has a strategy. It's a strategy where the county governments are involved, the national government is involved, other development partners are also involved, and the strategy is called Ending Drought Emergencies. It started in 2013 at part of Vision 2030, Medium Term Plan 2. Now we are going to Medium Plan 3 of Vision 2030. And it's a long term, 10 years, around from 2012, 2013. And we think if that strategy is properly implemented by 2022, in some of these counties, even if drought is there, the impact should be properly minimized. We are saying it is a strategy where all the stakeholders must play a role. It's not only the government, it's very expensive. So we expect all the stakeholders to play a role. And it's an agreement between the donors, between the national government, the counties, on the things that are supposed to be done to minimize the impacts of drought in these counties. And there are pillars, there are areas we are talking about. Not really everything, but the basics, the main activities that if taken into account, then the rest of the things can go on, the impact will be minimized. So there's a huge area of peace building and conflict management. It's a huge area to be done. Of course, priorities differ. Maybe in other areas it will be a big priority, in other areas may not be a priority. Then we have another huge area of infrastructure, where you have the roads. You would not believe it that the road can be an issue, but if you have a road, people will do business, there'll be food supply. Then you have that infrastructure. We also have livestock issues. We also have agriculture issues like irrigation schemes. We also have water issues, the ponds, the dams, the boreholes, and all this. Then I've also mentioned human capital, where you have the whole area of education. If people are educated and they are doing their work, drought can hit, but they have got their money, They are not losing livestock. They are not depending on livestock. They can survive. Then you have a whole area of health and nutrition things that are supposed to be done. Because the malnutrition is not only as a result of food. Yes, food is there, but also environment. If you are in a dirty environment, you take dirty water, all this is a problem. Then you have the whole issue of sustainable livelihood. Like now, the biggest problem in some of those areas, the livelihoods are not diversified. Communities only depend on livestock, bringing in food or income maybe up to 50–60%. If that one fails, they are in trouble. So you need diversified livelihoods. People should do agriculture, livestock, business, other things, employment, so that when one livelihood fails, there's the other one. For you to see the difference, you must compare. For example, what happened during the major droughts we have had. What happens, for example, 2005, 2006, we had some drought, not a major one. 2009, we had a major drought. 2011, we had another major drought. Recently, we have also had a drought. So if you compare the figures and what has been happening and the numbers, we are not yet there. But if you compare those numbers, then you can see gradually there's some small difference. For example, as we speak now, the number of people who are affected in Turkana that require assistance, and especially food assistance, we are talking of 351 people. That is close to 32% of the population. Previously, a time like this, you would have 80% of the population being affected. So when you look at the numbers alone, assessed as being affected right now, compared to the past, and even as a percentage of the population which has grown, you can see that one is less. If you see, even in terms of malnutrition, the number of children who are being affected, we are not yet there, but you can see gradually the number has been going down. So that one can show you that maybe it's not moving as fast as was expected. We are not yet there 100%, but can show you that the little that has been done, and especially since the county governments came into place, and they have been implementing a few things, then gradually this problem is lessening. Like, for example, in Turkana, a lot has gone on. There are some irrigation schemes that have been developed, which were not there before, and you find the pastoralists, or people used to depend on livestock, or people used to drop out when they lose livestock during drought. Now they have got alternatives. Turkanas growing crops, sorghum, and growing other things. You cannot believe it. You can find that in Turkana nowadays, with the tulo oil and others, and the economy growing, there are so many people who are also employed informally doing their own businesses. You can find also in Turkana, if you look at the water alone, the number of dams, for example, the number of ponds and other things, there have also been a lot of development. So you can only judge whether the situation is the way it used to be, or whether the situation is improving or worsening, if you look at the past major droughts and compare with what is happening now. But from the statistics, it shows, maybe it's not something great, but it shows clearly that since this EDE started and since the county government came into place and something is happening, there's definitely a difference between what you used to see, the numbers affected, and what we are seeing now. It's not that we should now sit back and say that's good. It's not good enough. We are supposed to fast track what we are doing. We are supposed to work even harder to show that by 2022, then the situation will be different. So by 2022, if I go to Turkana and stand at a spot and ask myself, how will the drought situation will be at that time, and how was it in the past, and then compare the number of livestock that used to die and what will be dying in 2022. If I find a big difference, the number is less, then I know something is happening. If I see the number of people assessed as needing relief food is less, much less than what used to be, then we'll know something is happening. Malnutrition also. If I stand somewhere and like now you are saying 35 or over 30%, that time, and I see the malnutrition, those numbers are low, then I know something is happening. So we have something, we have a direction, we are moving there, and we just need to work extremely hard so that we get there.
All right. Yeah. So right now, the rates are bado high. It's way above. We're talking about malnutrition.
Yes.
Rates are so high than what the WHO talks about.
Yes.
So what are you doing as the National Disaster Management
Yeah.
authority.
Yeah.
What is even the county, the national government doing to avert the situation?
Two things. The way I mentioned, two things that are happening right now. There's the short term. And in this short term, there are specific intervention targeting malnutrition. And we started way from last year. Maybe let me give you a bit of statistics. The national government, between November last year, December and January this year, released 5.4 billion Kenya shillings for most all the sectors as intervening in the drought. That was what was required then. Then we had a phase 2, February, March and April. The budget was 11 billion, but the government, through the National Treasury, released 7.4 billion, again for all the sectors. This time, as I speak now, from September up to December, that is our phase 3, short term, to intervene. The government is in the process of releasing 6.2 billion. Now, that is for all the sectors. Specifically, what we are doing about malnutrition, first and foremost, is the food, which the national government is giving and other stakeholders. Because the biggest problem, malnutrition, is usually as a result of food scarcity and inadequate and not the right type of food. If you go to other things, you'll find that a lot of screening is going on, supplementary feeding, therapeutic feeding, and also a lot of the disease issues, the treatments, the disease control. So out of that budget that I've mentioned, inside there, then there's a specific item on health and nutrition to do those things. That's what we have been doing, and that's what we do anytime we have a drought all along. That is short term. Now, in terms of long term, if you go to a place like Turkana or other counties, then you will also find that there are investments in long-term sustainable development regarding health issues. The hospitals, the health centers, the things like the water, things like even how to produce food and to do other things. So in short, there are programs that are going on which are long-term, which maybe you may not appreciate because they are very slow and you cannot see the impacts immediately, but also short-term, what I'm saying right now going on in terms of those interventions by the government and other stakeholders. So two things moving almost simultaneously. One is the short-term, to contain the problem right now the way it's happening, but another one, you are doing it now, but the results may be seen 3 years to come, 4 years to come, or 5 years to come.
Right.
Yes.
And we happened to speak with the CEC for Turkana County Ministry of Health,
Mm.
and she told us that the budget she gets for malnutrition is 10 million,
Mm-hmm.
and it has not been increased, even following the crisis on nutrition in the country.
Mm-hmm.
What will you take on that?
Now, what I know, if she says she gets some money, that's not the only amount. That is what she gets in Turkana. How about the contribution from the national government, the Ministry of Health itself, contribution from the Ministry of Health, out of this amount that I've mentioned? How about the contribution from organizations like NDMA? Because we also chip in. We give money specifically to those counties for the health and nutrition. How about contributions from UNICEF? How about contributions from WFP, for example? Because there are contributions from the UN, there are contributions from the NGOs, there are contributions from the national government, there are also contributions from the other national bodies like NDMA. If you put all this together, then the budget for health and nutrition that goes to Turkana definitely is much, much more than the 10 million, which the county government is providing. Then number two, when the county government has been given the resources, I think nobody really controls the county to say, now, this is your resources, this is how you use it. It is up to the county government itself to look at their priorities, which, if you have, let's say, 100 million, and you are given 100 million, which is the priority? If health and nutrition right now is the biggest issue, and I agree with you, it's a big issue, it's up to the county government to give it a priority, which means more resources should be going to health and nutrition. If their priority is water, then more resources in terms of development should go into water. So I must say that if it's 10 million, but the county government of Turkana thinks that malnutrition is the biggest problem, then I think the county government should give it a priority. You cannot treat all the sectors in the county the same. Yeah, you can say, okay, for the time being, let me reduce development in one area and increase development maybe in this particular area. So I think in summary, it's like, that's not the only budget. There are others that come in which we need to put together, and then the county should give it a priority. And that one we have got no say. It is up to the county to decide.
Right.
Yeah.
And as NDMA, from your own take, do you think you are doing enough to counter what is happening in Turkana?
First of all, let me say that as NDMA, we are not sectors. We are not agriculture, we are not water, we are not in livestock in those issues. So we are not supposed to really go and start doing those things a big way. Ours is to coordinate. Ours is to provide guidance on what should be done in each sector if you want to end drought emergencies. Ours is to help also mobilize resources and chip in. But the real development, the real activities in those counties should be done by the various sectors themselves. Because as NDMA, we cannot replace agriculture, cannot replace water, we cannot replace livestock. They're supposed to be done. But we coordinate and give guidance. But to be honest, not only in Turkana, in most of those counties, if I look at what we are supposed to do in the remaining years, and if I look at what we have done in the past, I wouldn't say it's adequate. The resources are always scarce, the priorities are many, and therefore there's a lot of struggle. Which area do I give how much, which area do I leave out? And because of that, these activities that I'm talking about in ending drought emergencies, they have not gotten maybe a lot of money the way I would have wanted. For example, since we started in 2013 up to now, after the first 5 years, if I look at what we have implemented, it is close to maybe 30% of what we are targeted. So we have only done 30. Maybe next time we'll do more. Even I'm sure in county government of Turkana, maybe has done only the first 5 years, they have only done 30% or 40% of what they would have wanted. So what we are saying, because the resources are never adequate, and we cannot do 100% of what we have planned, we need to mobilize more resources from all the stakeholders, the donors, the government, the county government, and we need to fast track what we are doing. Resources will always be a problem. You cannot get enough of what you want, but we need to do much more than that. Not only the government, we have got all these stakeholders supporting us. So people should judge themselves on how much they are contributing to the whole thing, government and others. So I think we need to do more. Yeah. We work a lot with the communities, and we take community through certain processes. A very long process. At the end of the day, the communities will tell you what they know about their surrounding, what they know about the hazards that affect them, and what they know what should be done about those hazards in short term and in the long term. And they'll also tell you what they're able to do as communities themselves in a small way, and what kind of help they want. First of all, we must appreciate that these communities, they have got a lot of knowledge. They have got a lot of experience. They have stayed there for all these years. So there's something that we can learn from them. And if you want to do a good job, then let's start from what they are doing, and let's work out from there, and let's strengthen. If I went to Turkana today and I survive in that same condition, 100%, 1 month from now I'll be dead. Maybe even not 1 month, you'll be dead. This guy has lived there, and some of them are old people. So there must be something they know, there must be the trick. So what we usually do with them, we get to know how they survive, what they do, and we build from there. Because they have also got limitation, what they can do and what they cannot do. So you learn, and then you build from there. So already I know things are changing. Maybe the situation is like what not used to be, but they know. So for example, they'll tell you, we need pans here or water to survive, because they need that water. If they can do the limited way, then you do more for them. They can also tell you about livestock. Now livestock cannot survive. Probably we need to reduce the numbers so that even when they die, or we don't have enough pasture, then you do that, but now you give them some alternative, something like that. So I think already in that environment, they know. They do survive. It's only that the situation is changing. The magnitude of the problem is so big, we need now to help them, to build from there and help them now do much, much more. Yeah. My additional information is to say this. First of all, we appreciate those areas the way they are. And there are so many areas like that one in the world. And that's how they were created. However, the biggest problem is that communities cannot cope. They don't have the capacity to cope. And things have changed. The situation in terms of climate change and adaptation is worsening, and they need to be supported. And then thirdly, together with other stakeholders, we already have a direction. We already have a strategy. It's not that we don't have ideas. We know what should be done in those areas. So for me, it's just calling upon concerted effort from the county governments, from the national government, from other stakeholders to work hard and fast track. It's not a dream. 5 years from now, if you work hard and fast track, you can see a lot of change. I've been in this business since early 90s, and most of the droughts we have gone through 99, 2001, 205, 206, 209, 2011, up to now. We have seen what's been happening. And when you compare what used to happen and what is happening now, we are seeing significant changes. The numbers of the affected are going down. The impacts in terms of livestock deaths are going down. The other impacts in the communities are going down. So we can make it.